The One That You Feed, written by GeneralLeia-SAOS. Rusty stood looking downwards through the diagonally angled viewing window of the alien spaceport Nagala. Rusty was the logistics specialist, one of the few humans in a crew of nearly 2,000. The majority of the crew, including the captain, were Denari, with aliens from several other races making up the balance of the crew. He watched the orbital bombing of a human warship on the Unla homeworld. Conflict between Unla and the Denari was until now quite mundane. They boarded each other, so they had the usual border disputes over the territory with contested planets, shifting ownership every few years. A lone ship with light armament from either side would drop a couple bombs and annex the area. There was no resistance from the inhabitants. Several other planets, for the sake of efficiency, had actually set up target zones in uninhabited areas, so that whoever wanted to declare themselves the owner of the region could drop ordnance at that site, rather than destroying any property or kill any inhabitants. It had all become very boring and civilized over the last few centuries, until someone decided to get the humans involved. Rusty stood, watching the assault through the window, grim-faced with some ugly memories of his time in the Terra Marines playing through his head. That's why he seemed not to notice when Captain Va'an came ambling towards him. Va'an was a Denari, a huge crab insect-looking creature that typically towered over Rusty. However, the way Va'an came creeping along with almost subdued posture would make you think that he was intimidated by Rusty. Va'an gazed through the window for a moment, then chittered. "I've never seen such devastation, Oxidize. Is this truly how your species normally conducts warfare?" The corner of Rusty's mouth twitched. "Rusty, Va'an, Rusty. When are you ever going to get my name fixed in your translator?" Va'an's head seemed to tip. "Apologies, Rusty. I'll attempt again to have the issue corrected." Rusty's eyebrows lifted. Denari were extremely hierarchical, and therefore higher-ranking individuals never apologized to lower-ranking individuals under any circumstances. The abrupt way that higher-ranking individuals would speak to lower-ranking individuals was infuriating to most humans. However, Rusty had been raised by his grandfather, an old combat veteran with chronic pain, who believed that actions spoke louder than words. The Denari lack of trivial niceties didn't bother Rusty, especially not after his years in the Terra Marines. However, the fact that Va'an had apologized to Rusty, especially for such a trivial matter, was significant. Rusty turned towards Va'an and decided that an attitude of kind condescension, like when speaking to a child, would probably be most appropriate. "Tell me what's on your mind, Va'an." Va'an shifted a lower appendage slightly and pointed down through the window. "Normally, I would not experience any distress at the suffering of Unla, but this level of devastation just seems excessive. I never would have believed such a thing possible, especially when the conflict between our species has been mundane for so long." Rusty sighed. "Va'an, do you remember when I warned you not to get my people involved? This is why. You know that the other human that ran the shuttle service at Space Station 6 told you the exact same thing." Va'an clicked and replied, "I remember. You and he intensely disliked each other. The animosity seemed even stronger than when competing for a mate, yet you had complete consensus." Rusty nodded. "That should tell you something. We have practiced every type of warfare and military philosophy imaginable even before we begin to record our history. One of those philosophies is that when you get involved in someone else's conflict, the best strategy is to wait for two sides to wear each other down, then go in with fresh troops and completely decimate both sides. At that point, you set up a puppet government made of local politicians, so it gives the natives the illusion that they are still in control of their area. We let you keep your ruler, traditions, and religion, but we also send in an advisor who is the actual ruler of the area, and institute our own language for all official correspondence and functions. We collect heavy taxes and station permanent garrisons, calling them peacekeepers who protect our new ally. Their actual function is to ensure the taxes are collected and to eliminate any potential sign of insurgency as soon as it is detected. The empires that my people established that followed that protocol lasted over 1,000 years. This is who my people are." Va'an wiggled a couple of upper appendages. I'd heard some stories, but they seemed rather far-fetched. All of your people that everyone has encountered has been entertainers, artists, laborers, and service personnel. Well, you do have a military. They are not a codified caste within your society, and they also represent less than 2% of your population. If I was not witnessing this with my own eyes, I would never have believed that this was possible.
Rusty thought for a moment. My grandpa told me a story that might explain this.
Vahan shifted his body, settling to a resting position, so that he could fully concentrate on the story. Fables, legends, traditional myths, and other such stories were highly prized in galactic society, because they could give you a far more insight into an alien culture than months of lectures in a classroom. Please proceed. You have my full attention.
Rusty's look turned inward, reliving childhood memories. I used to get into fights when I was a kid, which is fairly common for young boys. I was trying to stop, but it was difficult, so my grandfather told me the story. There are two wolves living inside of us. There is a wolf who is violent, and then another who is kind. They constantly fight for control. I asked my grandfather which wolf was the strongest. He told me the one that you feed. If you act violently, then that feeds the violent wolf, so that your nature will become violent. However, if you act with kindness, you feed that one so that it'll be stronger, and you will be kind. However, the other wolf is still there, weaker, but not dead. Humans always have that violent wolf trying to gain control.
Vahan contemplated the story, then finally spoke. Is that who you are?
Rusty looked at Vahan steadily without blinking. Yes. I've been violent in my life, and not just when I served in the Terra Marines. I constantly feed the kind wolf, so that the violent wolf does not take over.
Vahan contemplated for a few moments more, then finally spoke. We just received word that a human fleet has surrounded Dinar demanding surrender, and that most other Dinar colonies are being occupied now. The Council is still trying to reach consensus on how to deal with the situation. However, I've decided how to proceed in regards to my ship.
Vahan straightened up from his resting posture. Rusty's eyes grew wide and then narrowed. His heart suddenly accelerated. His fists clenched and his entire body tensed. He'd made several jokes about Vahan possibly eating him, but with his news, the Vahan towering over him, those jokes didn't seem so funny now. Vahan instantly detected the shift in Rusty. His combat pheromones had suddenly become overwhelming as the aggression hormones surged. Something that made humans so terrifying was their ability to instantly produce large amounts of aggression hormones at will. These hormones were at least as strong as restricted combat enhancement drugs, to the point where humans could exceed their normal physical limits. They could also ignore pain and deadly wounds, instantly purge debilitating intoxicants, and even be fully consumed by psychotic rage. This made sense considering that human home planet, Earth, was at least a Class 11 Deathworld. What's more, humans produce more than one type of those hormones, so to neutralize a human in combat, you would have to atomize them. This is why humans were actually banned from several regions of space. Vahan had planned on a formal ritual to handle the situation, but seeing and smelling Rusty in the state was terrifying. He crashed down to the floor, withdrew his appendages, and spoke deliberately and quickly. As captain of the Denari ship Nakala, I hereby surrender the ship and crew to you as a representative of Earth. Neither I nor any member of my crew will take any hostile action against any human, or Earth ship or organization. We ask you to accept our surrender immediately without condition. Rusty blinked several times, feeling almost lightheaded as his brain processed what he'd just heard, and the adrenaline drained from his system. Finally, he nodded. As a representative of Earth, I accept your surrender and place you under my protection. I have a couple Earth flags in my cabin. I'll give them to the maintenance crew so the ship can be marked appropriately. Vahan gave a series of small clicks, almost like Denari version of giggling. He would be awarded status by his government once they reached consensus, because he had managed to save the ship and crew without violence or property damage. Rusty couldn't believe his luck. He was now a glorified stockroom clerk, and yet somehow had secured the surrender of a 2,000-crew alien vessel without lifting a finger. He was going to get free drinks for life with a story like that. The universe was really a weird place. End of story. Story number 2. A different kind of warrior race, written by Atra55. The lecture was nearly over. Professor Reitmack had one last piece of advice for the students of the Military Academy of Ston. He had been looking forward to this moment, and this year he had found some truly wild examples. This was going to be fun. Finally, never under any circumstances anger one of these species. They are warrior races, and conflict with them would be devastating. As the students were reading the list, a few hands rose. Reitmack was savoring the moment, probably his favorite of the class. He asked with a malicious smile, "Yes, what is your question?"
"Excuse me, mister. Isn't there a mistake on your list? What are the humans doing there?"
"Well, there are many kinds of warrior races. There are species like ours, where the government is a military junta, and as such their army is very powerful. But the humans aren't in that category, clearly. Others might be naturally good at killing, have an honor code pushing them to fight, or are simply paranoid. But the humans aren't in these categories either. No, they're in their very own category. Natural weapon designers." The students didn't know what to think of that. Well then, time for examples. He would start with a classic. "You don't seem impressed. Did you know that we had a human exchange student a few years back? In the military engineering course, obviously. But do you know what he made as his final project?" The students looked bored, not seeing what was so interesting in the humans. Some of them were already preparing to leave. That would soon change, however. "A shotgun. I heard humans love those," a student suggested. "No, that would be too simple for him. Most students in his class designed a rifle, a submachine gun, or a shotgun if they were feeling audacious. He designed a saw blade launcher." "A saw blade launcher? What did it do?" "Launched saw blades, obviously. It could hold as many as 12 in the magazine and fired 3 per second. It launched them at Mach 1, spinning at 6,000 rotations per minute. The buzzsaws would bounce around the room, destroying everything that was less solid than 5 centimeters of steel. Right after the demonstration, an addition was made to the Universal Rules of Warfare, adding saw blade launchers to the list of weapons banned for being too inhumane." All the students were paying attention now. "And if you still think declaring war to humanity would be smart, I'll have you know that a collective of human scientists and engineers designed, in their free time, mind you, a planet-destroying laser." The professor began to raise his voice. "Their plan consisted of detonating a 10-gigaton antimatter warhead on a small moon. It would create a crater that would be used to concentrate the laser. The details were classified because they managed to make destroying a planet nearly 200 times cheaper than before. Why did they do this, may you ask? Because it is, and I quote, cool." He was slowly getting closer to the students. "Recently, a group of amateurs designed a brand new type of bomb. It liquefies everything in its blast radius, but preserves its shape. The molten silica mixes with whatever was there before, turning it to glass. What could push them to create such a horrible weapon? It made a mildly funny pun about a nuclear annihilation of a planet in their language." He was practically screaming at this point. "Earlier this year, while they were studying a potential cure for brain cancer, human scientists discovered how to make an infectious bacteria capable of destroying targeted parts of the nervous system of a species. This is perhaps the most terrifying weapon ever conceived, and they did it by accident." He returned to the board, having seemingly calmed a little. "Now, if this is what their civilization can come up with in times of peace, can you imagine what their military can design in times of war? Oh, and don't even get me started on the mechs. That'll be all for today." End of story.
I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.